let's dive into some of the abilities of these Golem AIs and why they're so different. And the first and very surprising thing is that they have emergent capabilities that their programmers did not program and didn't know were going to be there. So let me give an example of this. On the bottom, what you see is increased number of flops. That is the amount of computation going into making a model. And what you see are these jumps. So on the far right here, A, you see the ability to do arithmetic. These models can't do. And at some point, all you're doing is adding more compute. You're not even making the model bigger, and then boom, suddenly it gains the ability to arithmetic. Maybe that's not so surprising, but this one D is very surprising, which is the models were taught to answer questions in English, and you just increase the amount of compute, and at some point, boom, without being asked, they gain the ability to answer questions in Persian.
No one programmed that to happen.
All right, let's give some other examples. So this is the idea of theory of mind. Are people familiar with theory of mind generally? Okay, a couple hands. Really, it's just the ability to model what somebody else thinks or believes. It's sort of the basis of empathy. It's the basis of doing strategic thinking. And okay, so how well does AI do it? And it turned out in 2018, couldn't do it at all. In 2019, it was sort of at the level of an infant. It couldn't really do it. By 2020, so really 1 year later, AI GPT specifically was now at the ability of roughly a 4-year-old to do theory of mind, like the precursor to strategic thinking. By 2022, January, that had suddenly jumped up to a little less than a 7-year-old. And by the end of 2022, it was now up near like an 8.5-year-old. And after we did the first version of this presentation, GPT-4 came out, and if you want to have a guess at where it is, it's actually above the level of the average adult. Now, here's the kicker. This ability had grown without anyone knowing. It wasn't until around, I think, 5 months ago, that a researcher, Mikhail Kaczynski, thought to look and test it. And so we had already shipped these kinds of systems to hundreds of millions of people before we realized that these AIs had the ability to model the minds of the people they were talking to.
So just importantly, remember emergent capabilities. No one programmed it in, and suddenly these new capabilities are popping out, and we don't even know which ones are there because they're only there if we actually even test for them.
And you may be saying, like, okay, AZA, TRISTAN, maybe you didn't know about it,
yeah,
but it's not just us.
Yeah, well, so here is Jeff Dean, who is a very famous person at Google. He's one of the original kind of architects. And he said, although there are dozens of examples of emergent abilities, there are currently few compelling explanations for why these capabilities emerge.
Okay, so maybe though, it's just like all these things are built on text, and so it's learning to be able to model, like theory of mind, because it's like modeling all the novels or other things people have written. It couldn't possibly be that, say, these like Golem class AIs would also learn something like research-grade chemistry just by reading the text of the internet. But indeed, that's what they have learned. And this, again, was discovered only after the fact that GPT-3, 3.5 had been shipped to hundreds of millions of people, that they were better at doing research-grade chemistry than models specifically trained to do research-grade chemistry. And so suddenly you have shipped the ability to be like, oh, how do I create VX nerve gas? It knows how, from household materials.
Right. And again, notice that this capability was out there, but no one had thought to ask it, how good is it at chemistry? They discovered that after it had already come out. So one thing that distinguishes, so another little mini chapter marker here, is what else is true about these Golem class AIs, is that they can also make themselves sort of stronger. Electricity doesn't make itself, doesn't invent better electricity, but AIs can actually make themselves stronger. Specifically, how do you feed your Golem if you run out of data? Let's say it has read all of the text of the internet. We're out of text on the internet. There's nothing more for it to learn. So what's going to happen? Well, you might have faced a situation like this.
I beg your pardon? Feed me! Chewy, you talked. You opened your trap, you thing, and you said,
Feed me, Carbon! Feed me now!
Sometimes it feels like that's what it must feel like to be an engineer at OpenAI.
Totally. Also, that was the comedic relief. You're welcome.
We know there's a lot of really dark stuff in here, and again, promise you, we're taking you through the dark side so we can get to the other side. Okay, so what do we mean by using AI to feed itself? Well, what happens if you run out of data? Well, what if you focus your AI, say, well, what if I actually take this engineering and I focus on building a speech transcription system? So I can take audio, speech, and then turn it into text, and I get that to be really, really good. Well, then what happens is I can take all these other sources of information, like YouTube, which is a bunch of audio, podcast audio, radio audio, and then I can transcribe all these new sources of information using AI. So AI just opened up a whole new space that then allowed me to get more data, and then I got more data, and then I trained that to make an even better, stronger AI, right? So this is how you start to go from the exponential to a double exponential, because AI can be used. Again, it's not doing this on its own, to be really clear. We're not doing sci-fi reasoning here. We're just saying that a human being can use it to actually make itself even better at a faster rate. And a second example of this.
Well, and just a quick double on here is very recently, you're like, well, AIs generate text. Could you have AIs generate the text that then it can train itself on? Can it like I don't know, throw up a whole bunch of stuff that it can learn from? And the answer is yes. That threshold has been passed, and AI can make the training data that it can train on. But it's also learning how to make itself faster. And so this is NVIDIA using its own AI technology to optimize its AI chips. And these things are the new H100s that are now out in market, where AI is learning to make AI faster. You can see how this becomes not just an exponential, which is how fast things are moving right now, but a double exponential, that the faster we go, the faster we learn we can go.
And by the way, we're using this phrase double exponential because Greg Brockman from OpenAI, we were sitting in a conversation, he used this phrase. This is how they conceive of what we're doing. We're not trying to scare you into it's moving at this triple exponential and quadruple. We're telling you that this can be used to make itself smarter. And if you didn't know, GPUs, these chips from NVIDIA, are like the plutonium. It's like the input for what makes these AI systems. So if you take that input and you use it to make that input even faster, that's what's being done here. And importantly, nuclear weapons don't invent better nuclear weapons. But AI can actually be used to invent stronger AI. And that's what makes it so different. As we look for metaphors for how do we regulate this, how do we create a control structure, we have to understand what's different about AI from previous technologies.
So we thought we would rewrite, the child's parable, like give a man to fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Teach an AI to fish, and it'll teach itself biology, chemistry, oceanography, evolutionary theory, and fish all the fish to extinction.